Hey, it's 42. Val, Rory, hey, what's up? Now, before I do this video, I want some people to understand where I'm coming from because as someone who's criticized Tariq Nasheed with the the fallout between him and the ADOS founders, people will ask like, well, why don't you just ignore him? He's irrelevant, blah blah. And the reality is, he had he was developing reparations advocacy before ADOS came around. But he accelerated this by trying to steal a lot of their mojo and to make it seem like they're democratic shills, which, if you follow them tightly, it's not even worth refuting. They're like most black Americans, they're Democrats. Like a growing amount of black Americans, they're disgruntled Democrats. And just doing the whole down ballot thing, or like they're saying now with what happened in Michigan, the uncommitted thing, the Democrats don't want that. So to say that anyone who's doing that is a Democratic shill, to say that anyone who's saying that you can't vote for a lot of the Democrats on the top of the ballot, that's not even worth refuting. So the big question, and why am I doing this, is why is he worth the time? And for the like I'm saying, he had a piece of this lane before, and regardless of why he did it or how he did it, he did it. Regardless of if it's right or not, he's making a lot of reparations arguments against people. He's making pro reparations arguments against people, and for the most part, he's good at it. And I'm going to review this argument that he has with this white woman. And he has another one in this video with a white dude, but I don't even think, I'll probably skip that and just kind of talk about it with in relation to the other one. Because in this one, with the white woman, it works out for him in the end because she's just a son of a bitch, a daughter of a bitch, I guess you'd say. She's a woman. But he leaves a lot of money on the table. And he does so because this is like one of the main areas where he's constantly weak, in my opinion. So this, you can call it constructive criticism. This is from a video. Maybe I'll put the title of the video, responding to Tariq Nasheed's deceptive Karen's debate with a ghoulish, well, I'll just say she's a Karen. But you'll see the issues I have with this woman. But he leaves a lot of money on the table.
Presidency, all these crazy backwood
anti-black racism, but then
So I'm going to fast forward to it.
his image goes around the world. There's a risk families every single day with our talents in the justice created. That's where we hear white supremacy with the system of. Well, the thing is, I don't know you, and I don't know if you are or not a white supremacist. Now, what are you doing to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice?
Well, like I said, I'm teaching my children to base their values on kindness and compassion.
Now I'm fast forwarding it to this part. Because for a while they just go back and forth. And she's saying, like I said, because she already said this. But he asks her a question. What are you doing to replace white supremacy with the system of justice? I don't have a problem with that question. I would just cut to the chase and say, where's your stance on reparations? Because we already know how to do it.
And a person's integrity, not the way they look or if they're disabled or any.
Now, see, the problem with this, raising your kids to treat people as equals when they're not based on a conveyor belt of human rights violations, that doesn't make you an ally. Because that's treating everybody like individuals, but you can't have a nation that treats everyone as races for pretty much all of its history. And then say, okay, we've been okay lately. Let's turn it off. That isn't you being an ally. He asked you how you would replace it, how you would change things. And this is basically just saying, well, we'll pretend like nothing happened.
Any immutable characteristic.
Right.
But the problem with that is the immutable characteristic is, well, I guess it is. It is immutable. You can't change it. You have a class of people who descend from slavery, economic apartheid, terrorism, and all sorts of shit like that.
The thing is, in the white community, which is your community, there's a whole institutionalized system based on just that, where people are judged and punished based on how they were born. And that's us. This whole society.
We're saying the same thing for now. I'm not really disagreeing with him. I might say it in different words, but it's the same thing.
It's based on anti-black racism. All the institutions and everything under it is codified by the anti-black racism. It always goes back to how can we punish black folks somehow. Having one or...
See, this is where I'm slowly diverting from him. I don't know if every system in this country is set up in such a way. I just know that the setup has lasted long enough to where there are results. And he doesn't talk enough about the results. The results, and this is where him having an issue with ADOS dumbs him down. Otherwise, you would just listen to tone, know the data, and just say, hey, these are the results. Like, treating people equal when you have everything on equal setup, that's you can't really, that's not fixing anything.
Come in and you're cool with them, that kind of gives a facade of, hey, look, we're all kumbaya. But that's the limit to that.
Because it's hard to argue with the results than what he's saying.
There's a 6 Negro limit. People in your community will stand up to 6.
Also, unlike the C word, the community word. Reason is simple. There is no black community, and truthfully, there's no white communities. What you have are stable white communities, but they aren't always on the same page with white community over there, white community over there. Because you don't see white people say, hey, you know what? Let's raise up the white race by moving into the trailer parks and bringing up the tax bracket. They just leave them alone and give them some good Republican Django or jargon, I should say. But they don't really. There isn't that belief that you have this implication that you need to do this to raise up poor white people like you have black people talking about. You got to move back to the hood and blah blah blah. Like you can one man army it, and even if you had a whole bunch of wealthy black people, they'd have to all live in the same spot, which would be cool. It'd be like one really wealthy black neighborhood, but it would be 1 out of 6. It's easier for me to name black neighborhoods that were destroyed by what Tariq Nasheed is talking about, even recently with Flint. And forget that neighborhood in California that was firebombed. That was fairly recently. Or fairly recent.
Black people or less. When it becomes more than 6, you go on alert. That's a you problem. And that's a problem within your community that you have to go in your community and do something about.
I can't stand the C word. She cannot do anything about that shit. But he's going to get to something that she can do.
Because if you perceive black people as a threat that we have to keep getting punished for some other boogeyman threat, then we're going to have to come to some kind of conclusion because we are refusing to live in that existence indefinitely. So we're going to have to start off with this justice claim of reparations. What's your stance on reparations? If you want to do the right thing, what's your stance on reparations?
See, he gets to it. Right there. This is how you can tell if a white person is racist or not. This and if they keep Sambos around them.
Again, I am not racist. I teach my children to judge people on their character and not things that God designed them to be, whether it's a disability or the color of their skin. And I think as long as you...
She's racist. She's racist. You can't say this to anybody else or they'll check you for it. Even people whose human rights violations were happened a longer time ago. Like, you can't say, hey, do you think Hawaiians, after they've had genocide and theft of their land and their property, and after we've brought in invasive species to mess up their habitat, do you think they should get reparations? I'm not racist, and I treat people to the content of their character, and I'm blah, blah, blah. I'm like, answer the question.
You treat someone with kindness. That's the way to
I'm a
live
nice
life.
person.
So, do you think denying reparations to people who deserve it is kind?
Tariq, to be honest with you, I can't imagine the struggle of Black people because I'm not one. So if that's what you really think, you're entitled to that opinion. However, I think that the conversation that you're promoting is divisive and is not...
How so?
I just don't think it's conducive to us all being harmonious and loving of one another the way that God intended. We're all created in His image.
So you think? So it's me doing that, not the white supremacists.
Well,
within your
again,
community.
I guess I
She's almost funny in the way she just deflects. Like, just say no. Just say no. But she kind of seems to get that she cannot say no straight up and not be a racist. There's just too much history. She's playing with that in her mind.
don't like blanket statements in any realm. I don't like saying that all people are one way and all people are another. And the way that you're speaking, you're saying...
What does all people be in one? Like, she just left the whole conversation about reparations because he offered her a solution.
Man, let me slow you down. I had to mute you. Now, ma'am, I've never said on this phone that all white people are like that. And, ma'am, this is why we suspect certain people of being white supremacists. Because people who are suspected of being white supremacists, they often lie. And they'll make a lie up out of thin air. And you said something that was completely untrue, ma'am. And when you do that, then our antennas go up. Because white supremacy is all about warfare and deception. And when you're deceptive, that's divisive, ma'am. So
now, I don't think her dishonesty was that bad right there, but it gets worse. Because I heard this a while ago. Like, I heard this is 4 days ago when it released. I must have heard it within the hour. Because it seems like it was all 4 days.
You're being divisive by using deception, which is what some white supremacists usually do, man.
What did I say that was?
I think she's being divisive because she just moved away from reparations. He offered a solution. And she moved back to how you keep lumping me with as a white supremacist in this white supremacist community. And I disagree with that in using community in that way. I think you have to be very specific. You got, just like you delineate ethnicities from race, I think you have to delineate communities within. Because what we have a lot of times, as Tariq would say, the foundational Black Americans, I prefer Freedmen, but politically I prefer ADOS. Actually, I prefer neither if it was raw preference, but whatever that works legally, whatever works. If it's Freedmen, whatever works legally, make your power move. You can worry about what you're called at another time. Distant future for all I care. but make your power move in the name of whatever works legally.
Was deceptive or a lie.
You just told a bald-faced lie saying that I said that all white people think the same. I've never said that. You have white people and you have white supremacists. And the white supremacists are more powerful than the non-racist white people. Because we have a system of white supremacy and not a system of justice. And you don't maintain a system of white supremacy without a large number of people being on code with it.
But did you? You're correct. I apologize for putting words in your mouth. But you also said to me that my people did X, Y, and Z. Correct?
The people in your community.
Right. And I don't like blanket statements. I think that putting any group in a box or having a blanket statement is derogatory and divisive.
Do you tell your community that it's divisive when they do it? Because they do it all the time. And I say your community because a lot of people who are suspected white supremacists, who just happen to be white, they do that all the time. They have a whole system of judging us based on race. Are you doing anything about that?
Now, the interesting thing is, it's not just, how do I put this? It's not just white people. And that's where and this is just an issue I have that's outside of the whole. We haven't even gotten to the whole. But the focus on white supremacy more than racism goes too far with Tariq Nasheed. Yes, I will admit that it went too far in the other direction, and Tariq Nasheed went on TV. He was one of the first people to bring up white supremacy in a long time, and it started to even out. But in this conversation, he just confirmed he's dealing with a racist because he asked her about reparations, and she started talking about how she treats her teaches her kids to treat people flat. And this is, I'll just start to get into what this hole in the argument is. It's not using the results of white supremacy. Because she probably doesn't. We're going to keep going and you'll see why I say this. She probably doesn't live in like some white neighborhood that's way predominantly white with a bunch of people on code to keep black people down. She is probably just a common racist. And she's teaching her kids to be common racists. Because I don't care what you say behind closed doors. If your philosophy is, hey, I either don't know what happened to people who descend from slavery, or I'm ignorant completely, I don't care, or I know, and I realize that this has resulted in something bad. This is why I don't like using the C word. Bad in a way that it's manifested in thousands. Well, I won't say thousands. Hundreds, definitely hundreds of ghettos across this America, across the USA. Low-income neighborhoods. High rates of poverty, even when we've adjusted poverty to where it's just squalid, which ties in high rates of homelessness. A wealth gap that's close to $5 to 1 in bank wealth between white Americans who have been here a similar amount of time, maybe not quite as long in most instances, but some very long, and Americans who descend from slavery, economic apartheid that's lasted most of this country's history. And by some estimations, like David Swinton, Thomas Kramer, we're talking about an incalculable tax. I've tried to run the numbers. It's not a real number. To close the racial wealth gap is a real number. It's a settlement that can be paid. It's not, inflation is not an issue. The checks won't bounce. If you look at how much money this country's been printing before COVID, we could scale back the government and still pay it, close the racial wealth gap in close to 50 years. Give or take. Give or take 20. Country could afford it. Wouldn't have to expand the government as much as we've been doing since COVID. It's a bargain. It's a small settlement because the real number is not a real number. It's not, it's like, and I've said this before, it's in the quadrillions. It's rounding the quadrillions into whatever number is after that. It's not a real number. When you track everything from before this country was settled, or before 1776, to now, 20 trillion is a small settlement. And the only reason why this isn't, yeah, we do it, is you're dealing with racism.
How would you feel if I said the exact same supposition back to you? You would probably feel like that was a derogatory question, and I was
You couldn't say it to me because I don't have a system where I'm punishing people.
But I'm not punishing anyone. I'm not doing that.
But you're part of a community.
But why are you grouping me in with a group of people that I have nothing to do with, just based on the way I was born?
Well, you do have you're in the privileged class.
Now, I think he's on the wrong track, but because he takes her down this track, she's going to really reveal the thing I talked about earlier, where I question this woman's character. Now, right now, I think he already has her, by my definition of racism. He just hasn't circled back to reparations.
How so?
Because you're white.
How does that make me
I don't say that you're born in a privileged society because we live in a system of white supremacy that allows certain benefits and privileges to people based on race.
And I think that statement was 100% factual as soon as 40 years ago. But today, that's just not.
This is going to be funny because right now, her being a low-income white person works well with her argument. But her being a low-income white person is why her argument goes off a cliff.
Fact. So.
Oh, really? So 40 years ago, in what, 1980?
I'm saying, so it's like post-desegregation, that was a fact, 100%. So how are you lumping me in with something that happened when I wasn't even born?
Well, we still have segregation. What do you mean desegregation? We're still as segregated as ever racially.
And
blacks and white people don't live together in large numbers.
I guess my point, Tariq, is that I feel that your rhetoric is continuing that level of segregation and trying to separate us all by race.
But
I don't think that that's positive. I don't think that's what God.
If it sounds like I'm ruffling around back here, I'm just figuring, it's a good time to multitask. I'm cleaning the bathroom. I'm getting echo from the bathroom. I've got silence. So that's just what I'm doing. There was something I wanted to say, but I don't remember. It's this is where it's kind of getting interesting. So I'm just gonna let it play. No
Designed us
commentary
to
for a
make.
little bit.
So I'm making the white supremacists want to maintain segregation.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that your rhetoric is
Oh, I remember. Yeah, yeah, we're still segregated because we didn't really do anything to undo um, what segregation caused. So black neighborhoods are easy to gentrify, and the red line areas have never been improved. So maybe one or two. Like, but that's why I don't like the term community because we'll say community like we're not in red line yet. Like the exceptions are the rule.
is trying to instill the division between the races, and there's no need for that. We're all the same in God's eyes. We all bleed red. We're all the same. And trying to say that it's different is not okay.
Then how come your community segregated people based on race?
See, again, you're saying my community. So you're
white. You live in a community of white.
But you're grouping me in a population that I had nothing to do with. That's just the way I was born. It's not my fault I was born white.
Right.
So why do I have to apologize for the sins of people before me?
I didn't ask you to apologize. You're talking about divisiveness, but you're putting it all on me, but you're not saying that to the people in your community who are the major
dividers. I find anyone in my community who treats someone in an unkind way based on their race or religion or anything else, I will call them out on it. I absolutely will.
I know some people are listening to this thinking she deflected from reparations just like Joe Biden. Like, that's the thing. You mentioned reparations around Biden, and he's going to pop lock it off. At least Trump will kind of catch and play with it a little bit. But the only time I've heard him asked about it once, and his response treat was that he didn't think it was going to happen. But he kind of pondered it. He was like, nah, I don't think that's going to happen.
But you're not doing that, ma'am. You're calling me out, and I'm a victim of white supremacy.
And again, Tariq, I'm acknowledging that I cannot understand what you have gone through because you and I have different upbringings and different backgrounds. I'm not negating that at all. All I'm saying is it's unfair to group me in with, in your mind, as you say, white supremacy, simply because I have white skin. And that's...
And isn't it unfair to deny me the reparations that I'm owed simply because they're white supremacists who don't want to see black people get any tangibles?
Well, I guess my counter to that would be I never want to treat you differently. I had nothing to do with the sins of our past ancestors. It was wrong. It was terrible, the things that happened to Black people. It was awful. I will be the first to admit that. But to say that people today should have to pay for that, I don't think that's...
See, this is the big hole right here. And it's not just that we're talking about the results of the sins that she's speaking of and fixing the results, that we're talking about doing something about the present and the future. It's not just that. And it's not just knowing the data behind it or the results of the data in the sense that there's only about 6 good black neighborhoods in a sea of ghettos, probably 200 to 6. It's not just that. She should not be talking about how she's going to pay for it, because we just increased the budget by more than $1 trillion. You could do reparations right for $200 billion a year. You increase the budget $200 billion and keep it flat, and that's increasing the budget even going back to Reagan times. That's a slower increase than what we've already had. So if you're going to say you're paying for that, then you could say you were also paying for white supremacy because you were paying the government that created these problems. You were paying the government that didn't solve these problems, according to her, right after the 40-year mark. You're no more paying for the fix than you were paying for the problem all your life. And depending on how the government budgets, and depending on how much money she makes, you might be paying less. You might be paying for something else more than the fix in relation to how the budget is expanded, if it's even expanded. So I don't see how you can personalize that you or anyone else is going to pay for the solution. But I'll tell you what, you've been paying for the problem. And the fact that you even have to have these conversations with your kids is the problem. Not that you give it to them flat and you just say, treat everybody like nothing has happened. Just go by everything that person does as an individual, which is not the real world, as Tariq explained to her. And she seems to know that's not really the real world today. We're still segregated.
It's fair. I really don't.
Why not?
Because again, like I've said,
See, why not? Why are you even questioning why? If she's not really going to pay for it. I mean, the only way she would really pay for it is if we had a tax increase in her tax bracket. And the only thing we increased in terms of the budget was reparations. That's the only increase. And even then, split across all the other people in her tax bracket, it's not a whole lot of money. We got people who make $200 billion a year, individual, single people. Maybe not quite that much, or else we'd have a trillionaire by now. But we have 200 billionaires. We have people who are pushing that type of money. Probably not many. Let's look it up. I'm curious. Let's go. Actually, I'm wrong. We only have one 200 billion here. Bernard Arnault. Elon Musk is a little bit off. Bezos is just a little bit off. 196 million, 193 million. Zuckerberg, 175. I'm not that far off. By the time reparations are in motion, we will have people who are worth more than $200 billion.
I treat everyone with kindness and respect, no matter who you are, where you come from, your skin color, your upbringing. It has nothing to do with that. It's about the integrity and the content of your character.
She's quoting King, but she's not quoting I'm coming to get her check.
So why should everybody else who years ago was punished by the U.S. government, they get compensation to this day?
See, this is the whole. He shouldn't ask this question. He should know the answer. Racism, right? Racism. But here's the problem. He also goes back and forth on whether he agrees with it or not. I agree that they should be compensated because you're going to run a caste system if someone is smitten down hard like Native Americans, even if things are relatively peachy thereafter. They're owed reparations. It's like that with inland and Hawaiians. Would have been like that with the Japanese who were interned. It is one hell of a butterfly effect. Like I mentioned, people who talked about how COVID would cause permanent effects. Just no, not even COVID. Like a month-long lockdown. So I'm saying if it was just slavery alone, it would be owed to prevent the caste system that it already caused that we're talking about because we're dealing with the results.
But why is it a problem when it comes to us?
I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm just saying that
You just said that, yeah.
I don't feel. To be honest, honestly, I'm a single mom and I work really hard. I've got 4 young children and I work my butt off. And
well, we know the tax bracket, or we can suspect the tax bracket. Single mom has children. She's probably making 50 to 150 a year. She's got to be making decent money. Or she's getting a nice little child support chunk. Because them kids are expensive. And she's working, so she's not on the county. I'm not getting the low income. Actually, we're going to talk. That's going to key in a minute.
I'm doing the best I can. So to say that I need to pay for the sins of my ancestors who may or may not have been slave owners in California, I don't think that's fair. And I don't see a rational argument to refute that.
And this is, by my definition, reparations is not to address the sins of your ancestors. It's to address the results that those sins engineered. You see what I mean? Think of it in terms of the environment. If you mess up a forest and you got all these dry lands, now we need reparations to pay for the seeds to replant the forest. The forest could have been messed up 150 years, 200 years. But we need the forest back. Not to punish the sinner, not to bring justice to the ghosts from the forest that used to be there. Well, if I guess you're a spiritual person, you could say that. But you're doing it for the now and the future.
Yeah, the rational argument is in California, you see all of these Indian casinos out here that's underwritten by the U.S. government and our tax dollars. I never put no Native American on the Trail of Tears, no red one, by the way. But my tax dollars still go to fund some of these damn casinos out here in California. I never put any Jewish people in concentration camps, but my tax dollars still go to help the descendants of Holocaust victims. You see?
Well, you're kind of proving my point, though, Tariq. You're saying the absurdity of you not having anything to do with that, and yet your tax dollars are still paying for that. So I agree with you on that point. I don't think that there's any reason to pay for.
Here's the thing. He probably makes more money than her, especially if she's, well, who knows with child support. She could be getting nothing. She could be getting a landfall. So we don't know. We don't know. I would assume Tariq has more wealth than her and pays more in taxes. Okay? But just keep that in your mind.
For something.
This is about to get silly.
We all had nothing to do with. And I understand.
But it's being done, though. But it's being done. It's already being done. So if it's being done, do it for us.
So you're saying it's already unfair and you don't like it, so you want a piece of the pie.
If it's going to be unfair, let me get some of that unfairness too. If it's unfair and everybody's benefiting from the unfairness, then we need in on it. And we deserve it more than anybody, because the U.S. government directly, and this government is still around. This whole thing about, well, I wasn't born, the government was still here. This is the same exact government that subjugated us, and we couldn't get out of slavery because of the U.S. government. And the Supreme Court sitting up here talking about white supremacy and we have no rights that a white man is bound to respect. This is the U.S. Supreme Court saying this stuff. We are owed money more than any group. Nobody deserves more money than us. And you know it.
This is why I would attach. I don't like using the word deserve, because deserve it it fits. It's just not how we commonly use it. We don't commonly say that someone deserves to go to the emergency room if they have an emergency. Because we just assume that, hey, if just call 911 and they should work for you like they do anyone else. We don't really use that because we just kind of accept it as being natural. Now, when it comes to reparations, for whatever reason, we don't accept it as being natural. So deserve doesn't fit. What I would say is these are results. And this is why you've done reparations for other people, so they don't have similar results. I would cite Swinton. I would cite Thomas Kramer. And if I was debating people this much in person, I would cite other people and I would cite the numbers that I ran myself. And at that point, it's not a matter of do they deserve it? It's a matter of does the U.S. want to have a caste system or not? And I'd ask her, do you want one or not? Because depending on what we do with the budget, who knows who's going to pay what or how much or when or where? Will we get tax cuts, tax increases? Truthfully, it's not that much money. It's a bargain. When you got individual people worth over 100 billion, 20 trillion, bargain. Yeah, you can't do it right away. It may cause inflation. You can't do it, I would say, within 15, 20 years to jack 20 extra trillion. But like I've said before, in the next, and this is how I just diffuse this argument against this dude that I would call a tether. Forget, man, everybody, Tariq, whatever. But this is an example of a Pan-African, if ever there was one. And I'm like, he's trying to make the whole inflation argument. This was on Twitter. And I'm like, look, we're going to print or render, create, digitally manifest 250 trillion in the next 50 years. That's going to happen. I mean, look at the budget and where it's headed. Even if we go back to pre-COVID numbers, that's where it's headed. Even if we scale back and shrink government, which Republicans don't even do when they're in office anyway. But even if they did, even if we had a Clinton surplus, this money will become. So in that period of time, we're talking about 10% of the budget to break the caste system. That's a deal. That's a deal. And I don't think it should just be checks. But if you want to be efficient, that's got to be the lead. I think there should be some jobs, rebuilding some of these cities, towns, and neighborhoods that were destroyed. We need a new Okoye, a new Elaine. Well, Wilmington, I didn't know much about Wilmington, but other people mention it.
Know it, and everybody else knows it, and nobody has a problem with it. Giving people what they deserve until it becomes us getting the money that we deserve.
You know what? You bring up a really good point. It is unfair that the Native Americans are getting paid big bankrolls, and
no, they're not. They haven't set the Native Americans straight. They've set them straight than us. Significantly so. They've had lukewarm reparations. But reparations with them is different because they do it nation by nation, tribe by tribe. There hasn't been a hey, let's put them all together and that hasn't really happened. So we act like it hasn't happened for individuals, but it has. So it's about to get interesting.
And blacks are not. You're 100% right. That's unfair. I would also say that we should not be paying any of our tax dollars to repair the faults of people before us.
Well, that right there means you want to live in a caste system. And that is where I'm saying you had her. Like, this is a racist woman. Because that means we could do whatever we want to some people. All we got to do is just slump on addressing what we did long enough, and then you can make that argument. As a nation, you can be totally irresponsible.
I think that.
But you are. Shoulda, coulda, woulda don't mean anything. The checks are still going to these people.
And and Native Americans, Japanese, Japan, Europe after World War II, Guam, damn near all the new immigrants. The Homestead Acts, slave owners in at least 2 states. So yeah, I think it was DC and Kentucky where the slave owners got reparations. So yeah. And you know what happens then is when it's just for everyone else, but not black people then become deeper enticed into the bottom caste. To be honest, I credit black Americans for doing as well as they have. Yeah. I'm a descendant of American slavery, man. I just pat myself on the back. But I don't. Because to me, the back patting is for when you actually fix this.
Man, I hate that this money is going to them. It's still going to them. So the checks need to go to us, ma'am. We need to do the right thing and get that money to foundational black Americans and do the right thing.
Okay, Tariq, let me ask you this. Do you think that people of color are still discriminated against right now in 2024?
You know good and well, black people are. I don't know what a person of color is. Black people are, and other people of color are often used as buffers to put in between them and black people. So if they have like a minority program where they have to hire a minority, they'll go get an East Indian or an Asian, and that's a person of color. But these people are still allowed to be classified as white. Black people are still discriminated against in every sector of society.
See, by letting her talk, she's about to play herself.
Right now, today.
I don't think the statistics would back that up, but again,
See, this is where she's kind of pinging the hole. Because he should already came with the statistics.
Jots down when they discriminate, though. It's so normalized. Nobody.
Why the discrimination? Okay, yeah, that's important. And like he just said, who jots it down? But move to the results.
Jots it down.
But Tariq, I'm just trying to tell you from my personal standpoint. Again, this is what I started our conversation with. And again, thank you for giving me a mic. It's been such a good conversation. I am not discriminatory to anyone. If you're an asshole, you're an asshole. It doesn't matter what color your skin is or where you come from, right? And I want to teach my children that same thing. I don't want them to judge someone or favor someone based on the color of their skin. And it sounds like you want to be favored based on the color of your skin.
No, No, what now? Let's unpack that. Now, why do you say I want to be favored because of the color of my skin? Why do you say that?
Because you're saying that you don't have the same opportunities and you're still discriminated against. And I think that was true for many years, and that was an awful tragedy and it was a blemish on our.
This is where it goes to the results. If everyone else is repaired but us, that's discrimination. And you just admitted that. So then it goes back to, how do you feel about reparations? So she's right now, she's limboing.
History, but today in 2024, that's factually not accurate.
Ma'am, you're a very intelligent woman. So to sit here and pretend that Black people still don't face the same discrimination, that's intellectually dishonest.
How so?
We face the same discrimination. There's studies that come out every other week with bank lending institutions showing that they systematically increase rates for Black people and deny Black people loans.
That's dishonest. There are more government-funded programs to support Black people now than ever before in our nation's history. So again, I think you're being dishonest, because if
can you see where she's going wrong? All of those government-funded programs are available to everyone.
If you and I are the same on paper, if you and I are exactly the same on paper,
slow down.
You're going to get something beneficial, or I will.
Name one program that's benefiting us and not nobody else. Name
housing in California.
I'm all ears. Tell me what you're talking about.
I'm saying there are certain programs designed specifically for what you're talking about that are designed.
Name them, ma'am. What are you talking about, ma'am?
I just told you. There are programs specifically here in Southern.
For Black people?
Yes, in Southern California.
This is why I'd rather get people's names and just call them by their name instead of ma'am. Because it reaches deeper into them. Whatever they want to call themselves, I don't care if it's a fake name. She could be calling herself Sapphire. I don't care. I'm still going like, Sapphire, what you talking about?
There's homeless Black people all around Los Angeles, and we're trying to house them.
You're right. There are.
What program? What, ma'am? What program? Name the program.
Those are the results. When you have people who descend from 200 years of slavery, then another 100 years of neo-slavery. Really, it's 300 years and under. I don't want to think about it. It's depressing. But those are the results, though. Mix in redlining. And when I talk about economic apartheid, that's just one. In terrorism, those are just two words that encompass a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of acts. It encompasses months-long increases in lynching, but when Italians get lynched, they get reparations. So this goes way back. There's been this divide. But that's what you're going to get. Yeah, you get an increase in homeless people who have that lineage attached to them. And other people who are coming in here are subsidized, just got to the country and they're subsidized in terms of housing, specifically for them. We just can't jump, we're going to increase low-income housing because we have people moving in illegally. And okay, I'm going to jump in line and maybe I'm not making enough so I can get this low-income housing. No, nope, it's specifically for them.
Right, there are.
What program? What, ma'am? What program? Name the program. What program are you talking about?
Tariq, again, I think you're being dishonest. If
ma'am,
that there are not programs that benefit.
Name them then. Name them. Name it. Name
I can look it up, but I don't have my computer in front of me. But
because it doesn't, ma'am.
it does.
It doesn't
I know because I applied for it and I was disqualified because I'm white.
What program was
I
it?
didn't pause
It was low income housing assistance in Southern California.
You see what she did right there? So she's low income enough to where she thinks she can benefit from a low income housing program.
That's not for black people.
Yeah. It
That's
yields priority to African Americans and Latinos.
That's a lie.
Yes, I'm not lying.
No, it's no. It's for immigrants. It doesn't. No. See, now you're moving the. No. See, this is that deception. I know what you're saying is BS because we own a museum. We can't get a dime. We own a black museum. We can't get a penny from the state or the federal government. There's no programs for us. Zero. We have a Black History Museum.
I used to live in California. The low-income housing in California, there are no racial preferences. The preferences are for people who have two things: stability and poverty. So, black people compared to other people may have an advantage that we technically don't want to have and we would not have, but for the conveyor belt of human rights violations. And instead of addressing that conveyor belt of human rights violations, she's playing herself. Because she's not getting that. Because you have who knows how many descendants of slavery who are poorer than you are. But if you are reparationist, you could say, hey, I don't want to compete with that. But nobody looks at it that way. They don't look at it. Everyone's an aspirationist. They don't look at it like, yo, what if my money isn't right or the dollar is slipping and I need to compete with poor for poverty programs? But when it happens, now it's a problem that you got to compete with the denizens of Redlinia. Now you got to compete with what the USA destroyed. And lady, I bet between whatever she's making and whatever she's getting in child support, she's not losing that competition. So your money is too good for the low-income housing. I know rent is high, but you're going to have to pay it.
In South Central LA, we don't get one red dime from.
Yeah, she's playing herself. This is what the masses of white people have done. You know, and in California, she's probably close to being middle class. She's common folk. And if she wasn't competing with Redlinia and the immigrants that Tariq brought up and I brought up before, if she wasn't competing with that, she'd probably be in low-income housing right now. They were like, oh, okay, yeah, you got 2 kids. You know, we can, you know, that child support check is a little high compared to what your ex is dealing with. You know, we can cut his check down and we can work with you. Well, no. You had the opportunity in this conversation to say how you would deal with the caste system caused by hundreds of years of human rights violations, and you said, well, I'll teach my kids to treat people as they are today with no concern about what happened in the past. But that past came to bite her in the ass. Yeah, Tariq left some money on the table. I would have roasted her for that moment right there. Because that's really how she played herself.
From nowhere, we tried. The money goes to immigrants, illegals, white LGBT. It goes to diversity, minority. That don't mean black. So when you said that there's all these programs for black people, ma'am, you made that up out of thin air. And that's very deceptive,
I'm not
ma'am.
trying to be deceptive. That's my personal experience.
That's not your personal experience, ma'am. You made that up.
I didn't. But I'll be happy to DM it to you, Tariq. I don't want to argue with you again.
Because
I appreciate the conversation.
Ma'am.
All right, so he takes her off after that. So that's the end. And to me, what he left on the table, it's the results. That's the big hole. The only time he really talked about the results, it was the homelessness. And here's the thing. The hole in his argument, the vacuum sucked her in. She was like, yo, he ain't talking about the wealth gap. He only mentioned homelessness once. And now he hadn't even mentioned it then. He's not talking about what all of this white supremacy caused. He's not talking about like he's using community like it's interchangeable with black and white. Well, I tried to get some low-income housing, and I can't do it because we're already trying to take care of black people. That's where she's at. And that's dangerous. That is idiocracy right there. That's why, I'm reading a lot right now. I'm doing some things, but back to writing, back to what I was originally working on when I did this channel. I'm going to pause the movie script a little bit to write some other things and do some things that I can use as a second stream of income, and then it'll be back to using that stream of income to put the script on the screen. That'll be the thing. But yeah, in time, maybe near the end of this year, not even that far, probably November. Well, that is near the end, I guess. November, I need to start working on the miseducation of the albino. Because we had the miseducation of the Negro, and we need the miseducation of the albino too.